Hello, happy Tuesday. Aylen Lawler here to chat some more about training. I hope you're having a great week. I hope you're all doing well and that you're having fun with your dogs and all the good things. I'm here in Eastern Ontario. We got a bit of a snowstorm happening today. Nothing, I don't think, too serious, but it's cold and blustery. I just got in from a really great hike with my dogs in the snow, and I need to work on my snow legs. Hopefully they'll all be quiet because they do too. We haven't been doing as much hiking as I usually like to do this time of year. We just got through a cold snap of minus 20 or so, which is not as cold as it gets. We haven't had a super cold winter this year, which is great. We haven't had a lot of snow this winter yet either, which has actually been a little bit disappointing, but at least it's still really easy to move around. But there's just enough snow, I discovered, that it gives you a good workout to walk in. Good morning, Laura. Thank you for joining. Awesome. Glad to see you here. Hopefully this means you can hear me. So I wanted to talk a little bit more today about communication with our dogs. I want to carry on the conversation that I started last week. And if you're new here, I'm coming on live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern to talk to you about various training topics. And my focus is on working on both ends of the leash. So what do I mean by that? I mean that I put a lot of emphasis on the human end of the leash and how we think, how we behave, how we move through space when we're working with our dogs, and how we understand critical concepts of training so that then we can apply them in really effective ways and get the results we want with our dogs. Hi, Barbara. Thank you for joining as well. Thank you, Laura, for letting me know you can hear me. That's amazing. Excellent. Glad to hear that. So that's these are the conversations I want to have with you, and I'm really happy that you're here and listening. If you're listening to the replay, you can still join the conversation by putting your thoughts and responses into the comments. I'm also very open to, and I will put posts in the group inviting people to share any questions or things that you're working on. Yesterday, actually, I posted asking if you had 90 days to prepare for a trial. What comes up for you, and my question was both a little bit about like how would you prepare, but also what emotions come up for you. Are you excited? Are you like, yes, I can't wait to get back to trialing, this is gonna be awesome? Or are you like, oh my god, I have to trial, I'm not ready, I don't feel like it? And again, this is where the human end of the leash plays a really, really big, important role of working on our mindsets, because we want to pay attention. What is your brain doing? So I'm going on a little bit of a digression, a slight digression for the moment, away from what I really want to talk to you about today, but just because I want to respond to all your great responses to my post yesterday. And so when people were saying, some people were saying they're really excited, some people said they're focusing on plans, and some people said that they started feeling some anxiety and concern. So when you have your plan, your goal, so let's say it's 90 days from now, I'm going to trial, maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's not for 6 months, but you've got your plan. Maybe you're just thinking about your goal for the year. We've talked lots about that in this group already. Pay attention to what your brain does. This is always the very first step. Go, what is your brain? How is my brain responding? When I think about doing this thing, what does my brain do? Does my brain respond in a very calm and go, okay, yeah, perfect, we're going to do this, and this? Or do I start having some emotional responses? And you want to pay attention to that, because when we have emotional responses, our emotions come from our thoughts. So what thoughts are we having? Our emotions also drive our actions. So if you're having anxiety about moving forward towards your goal, be it a training goal, a competition goal, whatever matters to you, it's all that matters is what matters to you. If you're having some anxiety about it, you want to pay attention to that and go, okay, why am I worrying right now? This is what matters. What is my brain coming up with that's making me a little bit apprehensive about this moving towards this goal? Ev, hi, thank you for joining. Awesome. So the very first step is always to pay attention. What emotion comes up? What is my brain doing? So I just want you to think a little bit about that as you consider your response to yesterday's post. If you had to trial in 90 days, what comes up for you? Let's talk more about that during the week. Today, what I want to talk to you about is continuing our conversation from last week around communication, developing really strong communication skills with your dog. If you didn't watch that live, or just as a recap, if you did, what I explained was that understanding that training is communication. It's all about communication. And I'll explain what I mean about in a second. But I see that understanding, like really grasping this, is the very first kind of foundation concept we need to get in our heads as trainers. No matter what level of training you're at, no matter what you've accomplished in your life, or if you're just starting out, if you're brand new to this, especially for dog sports when you're getting into more complicated sports, but this goes for all training. It's all about communication. It's all about building a communication system with your dog, and every dog handler is going to have their own version of that. You're going to have your own sort of, vernacular, which is the like a language that you develop that's a little bit unique to your specific context. So every dog handler is going to have a vernacular that's their own communication system. And it's really important to understand that, because one of the things that we tend to do, especially thanks to the internet, which is a wonderful thing, has done fabulous stuff for the dog training world, and thank goodness for it during COVID, because otherwise we'd all be twiddling our thumbs and playing fetch with our dogs and not learning. So we have a vast amount of different options we can explore for teaching our dogs. Now, here's the problem with that, is that every person that you learn from on the internet is going to have their own version of the training language. And that's going to be a little bit different from what you're doing with your dog if this person is new to you. So let's say you've trained with me for a long time, you're going to have a system, you're going to have learned how I work with my dogs, you're going to take what you've learned from me, apply it to your context with your dog, you're going to have a system developed with your dog that's going to be based on what you've learned from me and what you brought to the picture from all your own past learning. So then you and your dog have a language. Then you maybe go to somebody else, and that other person has a different way of training, and you try that, and your dog is like, I have no idea what you're saying. So understanding that what we're teaching our dogs is a language is really critical. And that really helps us then become aware of how we, what we're communicating to our dogs and what they're communicating to us, so that we can have the results that we're looking for. So again, if you're working with many different trainers, which most of us are taking courses and lessons from lots of different people, which I think is a fabulous thing. I want you all to work with me. I want you to all join my programs. But I also think it's really important to work with different people, because you're gonna, you're gonna get things from different trainers, and you're gonna hear things from different ways, and you're gonna learn what works best for you. So, but you have to pay attention to the fact that everybody has this slight different version, or maybe very different version of how they communicate with their dog. And if you can see it as a communication system, then you can take from that and bring it into your own communication system and work with it, rather than suddenly start, speaking a totally foreign language to your dog, and then your dog is confused, and then we don't understand why. We think maybe the dog isn't smart or whatever. No, they're just confused because we're speaking a different language. Okay. So how do I put this into practice? I wish one of the things that I haven't figured out how to do yet, and I'm not sure that it's quite possible, is to play a live video of my training to share with you while I'm chatting. So what I'll probably do is actually create a little video and then just post it. But unfortunately, with my rural internet, when I try to play live videos while I'm also live, it doesn't work very well. So I'm going to describe a training experience I had this week that I think really illustrates what I'm talking about. And then I will actually share that as a separate post, so you can watch it later in the week. So I was working with Desiree. Desiree is my dog who has the most training, and we have a wonderful communication system, and I can tell her to do all sorts of things. She's got a really nice vocabulary, We communicate very easily, and the communication is definitely a two-way street. So I have my ways of communicating to her. So what are those? Those are my verbals. Though they are my physical movements, off many of them completely unconscious, and I don't realize that I even do them. But she reads them. She knows. She can tell what I'm thinking based on what my body does. Because remember, your brain creates your emotions, creates your actions. We have a thought, our bodies will express that thought. Most of the time, we're not even aware of it. Our dogs read our body language. So it's almost like they're reading our mind. So if you think your dog reads your mind, it's because, maybe your dog does. I will leave that open to possibility. But most of the time, what's happening is you have a thought and your body does something. Like you think, I want to tell my dog to sit. And as soon as you have the thought sit, you maybe like dip your chin down a little bit, and your dog has learned to read that little head dip as a cue that precedes the word sit. They probably don't even hear the word sit. They just see the little chin dip and sit because that predicts cookies coming. So the dog has learned that when you do this little chin dip, that if they put their butt on the ground, they get a cookie. And so that becomes part of the language that you have with your dog. You think it's because you said sit, but it's actually because your brain thought sit, your chin dipped, and then your mouth said sit, and then your dog sat because there's a little delay between your chin dip and the dog sitting. You think it's the word sit, but it's the chin dip. So again, we have our dogs are reading our cues. The other things that our dogs can cue from us, so that we have our words, and some of them they do actually know, and some of them are our physical ticks and tells that they've learned, our little movements they learn from that, and then there's context. So what's in the environment? So maybe it's a specific location, maybe it's particular props. And maybe, and then there's the time of day, and then there's also scent. So can they smell that you have cookies on you? And trust me, your dogs know. So I can open the door to let Aoife in, who she's my master human trainer, who has trained me to do all sorts of things. So one of the things she's trained me to do is to always have food within the close context of the door if I want her to come in quickly. And if there's no food, she'll just poke her head in and be like, there's no food. I can tell. You can't fool me. I'm not coming in. Go get some cheese. And she can tell if there's cheese or if there's, just kibble. So even like from 5 feet away without seeing it. So, they have the scent tells them things, the time of day, the physical context, our body language, our verbals, and then maybe any props that we're using for training. So platforms and fitness equipment and cones and all of those things. Those are all talking to your dog. It's a very, very complex, rich language that is telling your dog what to do. And that is how we communicate with our dogs. And so much of that we don't pay attention to, and to our detriment. We need to become much more intentional about how we are cueing our dogs well beyond just the words that come out of our mouth. The verbal sounds that we make are like one of the lowest on the hierarchy of responses that our dogs pay attention to. So we have to really pay attention. We actually have to work at this whole concept of verbal stimulus control. Stimulus control meaning that the dog only does, I'm not going to remember the full description, but basically you give the cue, the dog only does the cue, doesn't do anything else but the cue, only does the behavior that you cue when you cue it. And so all of that. We're not going to get into stimulus control today, but we think of the word, and so few of our dogs actually have full stimulus control based on simply a verbal. And most of the time we don't need it. That's the other thing to really always keep in mind. Like, do you really need this? Like, that's a lot of work to get that. Is it really important? For me, rarely. There are very few things that I really need my dogs to have that single cue mean that thing. As a sheepdog, there are certain things I need to be able to control them based on like whistles, for example. But I digress. Anyway, we have this whole complex sort of cacophony of signals that our dog is trying to interpret. Like I said, our body language, all of our movements, and we're like loosey goosey when we train, right? We're like all like moving around and talking, and then we have the verbal chatter going, and then we have our environmental stuff, and then we have all our training equipment and our props, and then we have like cookies, and we have like there's so many signals our dogs are getting, and they have to figure out, okay, this whole picture right now, what is this picture telling me? I like to consider that our dogs understand us in terms of a complex picture rather than a singular cue, which you can work towards. But for the most part, for most of us who are, the average trainer, we are presenting them with a complex picture, and that picture comes together as a cue. So in this situation, when my human, does this physical movement and has cheese in her left pocket and is standing next to a platform, I do X. When my dog, and so our dogs are genius that they figured this all out from us, right? It's pretty amazing. So we really need to, the more we become aware of all the different things that we are using as this cue picture for our dogs, and the more we can intentionally set things up to communicate with our dogs, the better the communication, the clearer it's going to become, the easier it's going to be for our dogs to respond. So that's our side of the picture. Their side of the picture is, how do they talk back to us? Well, they talk back to us generally in behavior, is right? So what does our dog do in response to the cue picture we've presented for them? And if the dog is doing the thing that we are trying to cue, then we have probably successfully communicated to the dog, and the dog is responding through the communication. If the dog is not doing the thing that we've communicated, then probably there's something about the cue picture that we're presenting that they don't understand. So how do they communicate to us? Well, like I said, so let's just keep something super simple. Sit. Okay, we want our dog to sit. If I have presented a cue picture, because I'm not the perfect trainer, so I don't have my verbal stimulus control where the dog will sit if I'm standing, in a different room and they can't see me, and they've never been in that room before, and I say sit, they still know what it means, and I like that's like in a perfect world. I am 100 miles from that. Okay, so I am like the messy trainer who talks with her hands and does a bunch of things, and I say sit, and my dog sit, and I'm like, boom, okay, in this context, in this picture, my dog knows how to sit. That's great. She understands, despite my messiness, that this is what I want, and that's how she's going to get her cookie. So, fantastic. Now, what if I say sit and she doesn't sit? Then I have to assume, okay, well, something about my cue picture right now is not giving the message across. So then what do we do? Well, we go, well, what did she do? Okay, so then we can go, well, did she lie down? Did she stand? Did she back up? Did she spin? Did she bark? Did she lick her lips? Did she start sniffing the ground? Did she twitch the ear? Did she glance away? Some of the responses that our dogs do, they're so quick and so subtle, we don't see them unless we watch them on video. So I think it's really, really important. And I teach this in my loopy listening workshop, that I think this is a really, really important skill to develop. And I will talk more about this with you guys down the road. But watching on video for these tiny little subtle things, and we want to see it, the more you can train your eye to see that. That's how our dogs talk. That's how they whisper to us, right? Ear twitch, looking away, sniffing the ground, licking a lip, just being hesitant. You say sit, and they're like, and they wait 2, 3, and then they sit. Okay, so all of that is the dog speaking back to us. It's their response to us. We've presented this cue picture, and then they're responding, and we go back and forth like this. And we need to understand, and my premise, I could be incorrect, but I really like to always approach my training with the belief that my dog will give me 100% and do exactly what I'm asking 100% of the time, because they are very willing and want to engage and do the thing. And so if they are not doing the thing, it's because of something about what I am presenting that is not clearly communicating to them what it is that I'm asking. It's not because they're stubborn. It's not because they're stupid. It's not because they're, whatever. It's because they are unclear, and it's my job to make it clear. Maybe they're a little bit anxious, but often anxiety comes from things being unclear, not necessarily because of the external environment. So it's up to me to figure out how to more clearly communicate to my dog what it is that I'm asking, and not and then the dog and then I just watch. It's this back and forth. It's this all about the two-way communication. So let me give you an example, and this is the video I will share with you later in the week once I get it off of my desktop and onto my iPad so I can edit it and make it something worth you watching. I was doing a training session with Desi, and what the training session was I was working through the foundations of movement puzzles, which is a program I'm working through created by Mari Waldma. And you should check that out if you haven't. She's got some great training videos going right now. And so I've been working through the foundations of her course, which I love. I think it's genius and brilliant, and really a great approach to building foundations in your dog. And so what starts with the 2-bowl game, which is where you have 2 bowls in your dog, and you teach your dog to go back and forth between the 2 bowls for cookies. And then you put a pylon, so if you can picture this. So I'm sitting on the floor and I have a bowl on either side of me, and then I have a pylon in front of me. And my dog she eats a cookie out of one bowl, and then she goes around the pylon and eats a cookie out of the other bowl, and then she's going back and forth. And then what I want to do is I want to push the pylon further and further out. And what that's teaching is a send out, right? So the dog is going out, around the cone and back, out, around the cone and back. And then what I eventually want is I want to have 3 cones so that I can make it more of an arch. Because if you think about it, if there's just like one cone out in front of me, it's like this very narrow channel. And if I have 3 cones, I can make it much, much rounder, right? So that's what I'm building towards. So she's going out back and forth around the cone. I actually have a stack of 3 cones, but they're all stacked into one. And I push the cone out further and further. She's doing it perfectly. Boom, 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 no problem. So then I take the top 2 cones off and I put them stacked in front of the first cone. So now what I have is a cone and then a stack of 2 cones. So to her eye, it looks like 2 cones. And she'd been perfectly going back and forth out around these cones until I put the second cone in front of her. And so to my mind, it seems obvious. Oh, well, she continues to go around the cone and go out the outside of and now there's 2 cones, so there's 2. Let's see here. So she would come and go out around the 2 cones and just keep doing that. Because in my mind, when they were like this, right, she goes, this is the job, you go around the obstacles like this. Now when the obstacle's like this, you still do that. That's the picture that I think that I'm telling her. Well, what did she do? She did this. She went between the cones and back. I was fascinated. And then she actually didn't just go between the cones. She went here and then she stopped between the cones, and they're like touching each other, so there's not a lot of space. And she did a handstand, and she put her back feet on the cone that was behind her. Okay? So I was like, wow, that is fascinating. What is it about the 2 cone setup that is so different to her? It's not at all, I mean, I would never have expected that as a response, but that's her behavior response to the cue picture I have set up for her. I was like, wow, what I thought was a super simple behavior of just go out around the cones. And when I put 2 cones, she's like, okay, this is a totally different symptom. This is a totally different picture. We're no longer playing that game. We're playing a new game of stand between 2 cones and do a handstand. That's what her brain came up with. Okay. So then I'm like, okay, well, how do I communicate to her that that's not what I want? And so I had to get clever. So I actually ended up pulling the 2 cones like right up against me and then started the whole thing all over again and gradually moved the 2 cones out together as a group. And then I had to do the same thing again with 3 cones, because when I took the 2 that were stacked and I put them side by side, so I had like 1 cone behind and the 2 cones in front, we went back to going between them and doing a handstand with our back feet on the back cone. So over the years, I have done enough work with her where I was having her do back foot target stuff that she assumes that there's something behind her, she's supposed to target it. If I do this training in a tight space and there happens to be, let's say, a chair behind us, and I move the cone out far enough that suddenly she's going between the cone and the chair, she will stop at the cone and do a handstand and put her feet on the chair. So to her, having an object behind her means do a handstand. So, okay, Laura, you asked, can you repeat the name of this foundation training you are referring to? Yes, it's it's movement puzzles by Mari Valgma, and her program is actually open for enrollment this week. So if you haven't checked that out, do so. I'm trying to think of I did share, if you scroll through the pages here on this in this group, you'll find a post to her program, but I will also share it again because these things get buried. But you can go down and find her movement puzzles. She did a series, a free workshop last week that I think is probably still available. But I will, I'll throw it in the. What I'll do is I'll tag you. I'll tag you with the link if you can't find it. So yeah. So anyway, so here I am doing this with Desi, and then the other thing she did is then she just lay down and stopped completely. And I gave her a couple of seconds to see if she would think about, if she would get back into this pattern, because we were doing this pattern game. And then she started to crawl backwards. So she started offering different behaviors because she was like, I don't know what am I supposed to do here? So it was so my whole point here is that it didn't, to my mind, I thought she totally gets this behavior. She completely understands the pattern. And then I insert this one, a second cone, and it completely changed everything for her. I got a completely different behavior. Now, Desi is very, very smart. She's a highly trained dog. It's not that she's dumb. It's not that she's, over aroused. It's not that she's being willfully disobedient. It's not that she's bored of the game and all the things that we tend to, assume when we see our dogs not doing the results that we are asking them to do. What was happening was simply that I changed something that to my mind was no big deal that completely changed her understanding of what was going on. So all it told me was that she didn't have the same understanding that I did. And so then I have to get creative. Okay, well then how do I go back to communicating? How do I communicate to her that, no, I want you to keep doing what you were just doing a minute ago, even though the picture changed? And so then I had to make the picture as similar as I could to the previous level where she was correct, and then very gradually start to grow it again and change it little step by little step. So, and then eventually over time, she's going to, start to understand that, okay, whenever I put something new in, this is how she's supposed to do. But we're not there yet. So that's where the communication is so important. I'm presenting a cue picture. I am presenting this collection, this whole variety of like me sitting on the floor, the two bowls, the cones, the location, the proximity to like the chairs in behind, all of these things Desi is aware of and responding to and interpreting. And then she performs a behavior that tells me if she's interpreting it the way I intend it. There's no right or wrong here. She's not wrong. She's completely correct in her interpretation. She's like, to me, this is what you're telling me to do. And I'm like, oh, okay. Apparently I spoke the wrong thing. I gave the wrong picture. Let me change this picture until you understand what I'm trying to convey. So it's kind of like charades, right? I'm acting out this picture to my dog, and then she's responding and telling me whether she gets it or not. So what I'm going to ask you to do this week is just to really pay attention to all of the different ways in your environment that you might be cueing your dog. And, sorry, Barbara, you wrote, Desi's response does not surprise me. Her picture of the behavior was one cone. It is very complex adding things versus taking props out. Absolutely. I totally agree, Barbara. And so, but I love that. I think it's so cool because they think so differently than we do, in how they interpret the world. And so it's so important for us to be aware of that, because we're very prone to labeling our dogs and misinterpreting what's going on and thinking, oh yeah, look, she's she just, I hear it all the time, where things like, my dog doesn't my dog doesn't understand, for sure. She didn't understand what I wanted her to do. Doesn't mean she's not genius, because she is. Doesn't mean that she's not giving me 100%, because she is. Doesn't mean that she's not totally into what we're doing, because she is. It just means that the picture that I set up for her cued her to do something different from what I had anticipated. So our work this week is to just start paying attention. Just be aware of, start to take a note. When I train my dog, what's in my environment besides my verbal cues and maybe even my physical cues? Where are the cookies? Where's the reinforcement? Where are my reinforcers, my toys or my treats? Where am I keeping them? Are there other things in the room? Are there distractions in the room? What props are there? What time of day? What sights, what sounds, what smells? What else is going on around us? Just become aware of all that and start considering how that creates a complete picture for your dog to interpret, and what they learn from that. And if you have any ahas from this, please share it in the comments. I would love to hear what you discover while you're doing this, because I've been training dogs for a very, very long time, and I'm still learning all sorts of things when I start to put that hat on and pay attention and what is my dog saying to me about what I'm doing, and having that two-way conversation. So love to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for listening. I will be here again next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And I'm also going to say, if you would like to hear more about my training and the things that I teach, I would love for you to join my email list. I send a weekly newsletter, and I also share any courses and workshops that I'm teaching. And when I open the doors to my coaching program, Dog Sport Scholars. So if you would like to join, you can join my email list at www.elenlawler.com, HELENELAWLER.com. All right. Thank you so much. I will see you next week. Bye.